Welcome to the Monsters Among Us podcast. This is episode 16, Lake Champlain Monster.
Ah, yes, Lake Champlain. It's quite a place, tucked up there in the northeast U.S., borders New York, Vermont, and even Quebec in Canada.
It's huge, right?
Yeah.
I read it's the sixth largest freshwater lake in the U.S.
That's right, massive. Stretches about 125 miles long, gets up to maybe 15 miles wide in spots, covers around 500 square miles of surface.
And deep, too, I gather.
Oh, yeah, very deep in places, over 400 feet down. Plenty of room for secrets, I suppose. A perfect spot for a mystery.
And that's exactly what we're talking about today, isn't it? This alleged monster champ, or champy as some people call it.
That's the one. It's considered, one of North America's big unsolved mysteries. There are hundreds of eyewitness accounts going back, centuries.
4 centuries, wow. It really does make you wonder what could be down there.
It absolutely does. And, the legend itself has become a pretty big deal for tourism around places like Burlington and Plattsburgh.
I bet. The mystery is part of the attraction.
Definitely. It's almost an industry built around maybe seeing something incredible.
Okay, so let's get into it. Where did this whole champ story actually start? It sounds ancient if it goes back 4 centuries.
Well, the roots seem to go back even further, actually, to the indigenous people of the area, like the Iroquois.
Really? They had lake monster stories, too.
They did. Legends of giant snakes in the lake. The Mohawks specifically called them Anyarkoa. So, yeah, tales of something unusual in the water existed long before Europeans arrived.
That's fascinating. So then the story about Samuel de Champlain, the lake's namesake, seeing it in 1609, is that connected?
Ah, the Champlain sighting. That's a popular part of the legend. The earliest specific mention of him seeing a monster seems to come much later, though, from a 1970 article in Vermont Life magazine.
1970, not 1609.
Right. The article claims Champlain wrote about seeing a 20-foot serpent, thick as a barrel and a head like a horse. Very specific description.
Wow, yeah. Sounds pretty monstrous. So did he actually write that?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The thing is, there's no actual concrete proof, no known journal entry from Champlain saying exactly that.
Oh, so the magazine article might have embellished things.
It seems possible. What Champlain did document seeing was a large, unusual fish. He called it chafaru.
Chafaru. Okay, tell me about that. What did he actually say?
He went into quite a bit of detail, actually. Said the locals claim they grew up to 8 or 10 feet long, though the ones he saw were maybe 5 feet.
Still a big fish.
Oh, yeah. Big as a man's thigh, he said. Head the size of 2 fists, a long snout, like 2.5 feet long, and get this, a double row of sharp teeth.
Yikes.
Yeah, and he described the body as pike-like, with these really tough silver-gray scales. Said a dagger couldn't even pierce them, so, an impressive creature, definitely.
Okay, so not a horse-headed serpent, but still pretty wild. Do we know what this chafaru actually was?
We do now. Later translations, around 1878, I think, identified it pretty clearly as a type of gar, specifically the long-nosed gar, Lepisosteus osseus.
A gar. So, a known fish.
A known, albeit large and somewhat prehistoric-looking fish, but yeah, not the serpentine monster of the later legend. It really shows how stories can morph over time,
Right. So the really fantastical descriptions, those came later.
Exactly. Jump forward to the 1800s, and you start seeing reports that sound much more like the champ we think of today.
Okay, like what?
Well, in 1819, there was a newspaper report in the Plattsburgh Republican. It was actually titled Cape Ann Serpent on Lake Champlain.
So linking it to other sea serpent tales already?
Right, and it described a sighting by a Captain Crumb. He claimed he saw this enormous serpentine monster. Get this, he estimated at 187 feet long.
Feet, not yards.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
It is quite a claim. It said it was about 200 yards away. But he also reported seeing, really specific details.
Like what, from 200 yards?
Exactly. He said it had 3 teeth visible, eyes the color of peeled onions.
Peeled onions.
Yep. And a belt of red around its neck, and even a white star on its forehead. Oh, and it was being followed by 2 big sturgeon and a billfish.
That sounds almost like a tall tale, doesn't it? The details are so precise, maybe too precise.
That's a very fair assessment. It does stretch credulity. But then you have another big sighting in 1883 by Sheriff Nathan H. Mooney.
A sheriff. Okay, that sounds a bit more credible, maybe.
Well, his description was less outlandish, at least in size. He saw it from the shore, estimated it was maybe 25 to 30 feet long, about 110 yards out.
Still pretty big. Did he add any weird details?
He mentioned seeing round white spots inside his mouth. But his sighting was significant because, he was the sheriff. His report apparently encouraged more people to come forward with their own stories.
So his account kind of opened the floodgates.
Seems like it played a role, yeah. The legend was definitely gaining steam by the late 1800s.
And didn't someone famous get involved around then?
Ah, you're thinking of P.T. Barnum, the showman himself.
Right. What was his connection?
He saw an opportunity, of course. He offered some serious money, first $50,000 in 1873, then another $20,000 in 1887 for the hide of the monster.
$50,000 back then, that's a fortune.
Absolutely. He wanted it for his shows. That kind of publicity, offering huge rewards, just poured fuel on the fire, really cemented Champ in the public imagination.
Makes sense. Money talks, and Barnum knew how to get attention.
Huh?
Okay, let's jump ahead. The Mansi photograph, 1977. That's probably the image most people associate with Champ, right?
It really is that photo showing what looks like a long neck and head sticking out of the water. It's iconic. Looks kind of like a plesiosaur.
But there are issues with it, aren't there?
Yes, quite a few. One major one is the location. The bay where Sandra Mansi said she took it, it's actually really shallow, like no deeper than 14 feet.
Not much room for a giant creature to hide or maneuver.
Exactly. It raises questions. How could something large enough to match the photo be there? Could it be something else?
Like what? What are the alternative theories?
Well, the most common suggestion is that it might be a submerged tree trunk or a large log surfacing. The way wood can sometimes float up end first could potentially look like a neck and head for a moment.
Okay, that's plausible. Was the photo ever verified?
That's the other big problem. Verification is basically impossible. Sandra Mansi apparently threw away the negative.
Threw away the negative of potentially the most famous monster photo ever.
That's the story. And she couldn't pinpoint the exact location where she took it later on, so without the negative to analyze for manipulation or the exact spot to judge scale and perspective.
It's just an intriguing picture with no real backup.
Precisely. It's compelling visually, but as evidence, it's pretty shaky ground. Robert Bartholomew wrote about this, and Philip Raines analyzed it too, pointing out these issues.
Okay, so the famous photo isn't quite the smoking gun. What about more recent stuff? There was a video, right? The Fulter Baudet video from 2005.
Yes, that one got some attention too. Taken by a couple of fishermen, Dick Fulter and his stepson, Pete Baudet.
And what did it supposedly show?
It's footage that, again, some people interpret as showing a head and neck, maybe plesiosaur-like. There are moments where it looks like a mouth might be opening and closing.
And was that analyzed?
It was. 2 retired FBI forensic image analysts looked at it. They concluded the video itself seemed authentic, like it hadn't been faked or manipulated digitally.
Okay, so it's real footage. But what of?
Ah, that's the crucial part. One of the analysts specifically noted that while the tape was real, you couldn't definitively see an animal or any clear object on the surface.
So it could be anything. Waves, a log, debris.
It's ambiguous. Again, interpretation becomes key. You see what you might expect or want to see. The analysts confirmed the footage wasn't a hoax, but they couldn't say, yes, that's a lake monster.
Right. Ambiguous again. There were also underwater sounds recorded, weren't there? That sounds interesting.
Yes, in 2003, this was done by the Fauna Communications Research Institute. They were actually working on a Discovery Channel show at the time.
And what did they hear?
They recorded these underwater sounds that were described as being similar to calls made by beluga whales or maybe dolphins.
But wait, belugas and dolphins don't live in Lake Champlain, do they? It's
Yep.
freshwater.
Exactly. Neither species is native to the lake, not even close. So that obviously sparked a lot of interest.
So what was making the sounds? Did they figure it out?
Well, the sounds were analyzed, and an article was published suggesting they were likely a form of echolocation. You know, like bats or dolphins used to navigate and find prey.
Echolocation.
Mm.
But what in Lake Champlain echolocates?
That's the puzzle. None of the known native species in the lake are thought to have that ability. So they recorded these sounds, identified them as likely echolocation, but the source, still a mystery. Doesn't automatically mean Champ, though.
Another piece that doesn't quite fit neatly. Okay, fast forward again. Very recently, 2024, footage from a movie shoot. Lucy and the Lake Monster.
That's the latest bit of buzz. Apparently, while reviewing drone footage shot for the film in Milwaukee Bay, they noticed something.
What did they see?
They described seeing what looked like a large creature swimming underwater just behind the boat carrying the actors.
How large are we talking?
Well, they gave the boat dimensions about 142 inches long, 50 inches wide. And they said the shape underwater appeared larger than the boat.
And what did the filmmakers think?
One of the co-writers, Kelly Tabor, seemed quite convinced it could be significant evidence of Champ. The director, Richard Rossi, said he shared it with scientists for analysis.
Has anything come of that?
Not yet, as far as I know. They did release a short 10-second clip on YouTube, which got people talking, but whether it's truly anomalous or just, a shadow, a school of fish, something else, we'll have to wait and see if any scientific analysis comes out.
Okay, so regardless of whether Champ is biologically real, it's definitely culturally real, right?
Yeah.
Has a big impact up there.
Oh, absolutely undeniable. The legend is huge for tourism in both New York and Vermont. It draws people in.
Like in Port Henry, New York. I heard
Yeah.
they really lean into it.
They totally do. Port Henry has basically adopted Champ. They've got a giant model of the monster there, and they hold Champ Day every year, first Saturday in August. It's a whole celebration.
That's actually kind of fun. Building community around a local legend.
It is, and it goes beyond that. You know the Vermont Lake Monsters baseball team?
Yeah.
Their mascot is Champ. They literally named the team after the legend. The mascot shows up at events. Businesses use the image. Like a car wash logo I saw. Champ is everywhere.
A symbol of local identity.
Exactly. More than just a monster story, it's part of the regional fabric. Drives tourism, local business. It's important in that sense.
And that Lucy and the Lake Monster movie taps into that too, I guess.
For sure. It's based on a kid's book about a girl looking for Champ with her grandpa. They filmed around the lake, premiered it locally. It's another way the legend lives on and gets passed down.
And didn't Port Henry declare the lake a sanctuary for Champ?
They did. A symbolic gesture, obviously, but they declared the lake a protected area, forbidding anyone from harming Champ. It shows how much affection, or maybe hope, there is locally.
That's quite a statement. But okay, let's pivot to the skeptical side. What does the scientific community generally think?
Well, as you might expect, skepticism prevails in mainstream science. There are just too many hurdles.
Like what, specifically?
The biggest one is simply the lack of conclusive proof. No body, no bones, no clear DNA, no undisputed photographic or video evidence, lots of anecdotes, but nothing solid.
Have the biological challenges.
Right. For a large aquatic animal, especially something air-breathing like a plesiosaur, if you follow that theory, to survive and maintain a breeding population in a lake like Champlain. It's tough. Where's the food source? How do they avoid detection more often?
And the plesiosaur idea itself has issues, right?
Huge issues. Plesiosaurs died out about 65 million years ago. Lake Champlain is much, much younger. It formed after the last ice age, maybe 10,000 years ago. The timelines don't even come close to matching.
So if it's not a dinosaur, what are people seeing? What are the alternative explanations?
Misidentification is probably the leading candidate for many sightings. Lake Champlain has some big fish, like sturgeon, which can get quite large and look primitive.
Sturgeon can get pretty big, yeah.
Definitely. Or large catfish. Also, think about otters. A line of otters swimming one after another could look like humps or a single long body from a distance.
I could see that. Otters bobbing up and down.
Exactly. Boat wakes are another common one. The way wakes interact can sometimes create strange shapes on the water that look like humps moving along.
You mentioned logs before, too.
Yes, floating logs, especially large ones, can be very deceptive. There's that story about the ferry crew.
Oh, yeah. Tell me that one again.
Apparently, a ferry crew saw what they were convinced was Champ. Huge excitement. Later, they realized it was just a waterlogged tree trunk. And then, supposedly, a passenger came forward later with a photo they'd taken of the same log.
Huh. Okay, that's a pretty good example of how easily you can be fooled on the water.
It really is. Perception is tricky. Our brains try to make sense of things, and sometimes, we see a rabbit when it could also be a duck, like that famous illusion. Yeah. A log becomes a monster neck. A wave becomes a hump.
It's the power of suggestion, maybe, especially when you're looking for something mysterious.
That definitely plays a role. Expectation influences perception.
But still, over 300 sightings reported. That's a lot of logs and otters and waves, isn't it?
It is a compelling number, and you can't just dismiss every single eyewitness out of hand. Some accounts are very sincere. There's that newspaper reporter you mentioned.
The one who didn't believe at first.
Right. Apparently went in a skeptic, came out claiming he saw 3 distinct large humps moving through the water. Things like that make you pause.
And there are other consistent descriptions too, right? Like in that documentary transcript.
Yeah, common themes emerge in some accounts. People describe seeing a black neck and head, or those 3 large humps slowly sinking, or a greenish-brown post-looking thing. Some mention the size relative to their boat fins, emphasizing it was large.
And locals seeing things even under the ice.
Right. Some ice fishermen report seeing large, dark shadows moving beneath the ice sometimes, things they can't explain. So there's this long history among people who know the lake well of seeing unusual stuff.
So it really remains this enduring mystery.
It absolutely does. The search for real proof continues. People are still looking, still reporting sightings. And for the communities around the lake, Champ is just part of the place.
Part of the identity, like Champ's trading post and stuff.
Exactly. It's woven into the local culture. So whether it's a real creature or a fascinating mix of legend, misidentification, and maybe a few truly unexplained sightings, Lake Champlain holds on to its mystery.
Makes you want to go look yourself, doesn't it?
Right.
Keep an eye out.
It certainly adds a layer of intrigue to a beautiful lake. You never know what you might see out there on the water.
Watch for some special episodes coming next in episodes 17 to 20. We are going to be looking at some strange stories about people disappearing in the U.S. national parks and forests.